All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have another session coming up. Let's go and hear it. Oh, losing my bells, losing my bells. There we go, there we go, there we go. All right, upcoming next, featuring Rob Gare from Miro, finding a winner, experimentation and email A/B testing. All right, let's go and get that queued up. Don't forget, put those questions in the Q&A tab on the upper right-hand corner. Don't miss them, y'all. Make sure you upvote the ones so we can stay on topic. All right, let's go and get that queued up, shall we? Here comes Rob.
Finding a winner, experimentation in email A/B testing. Hey campers, my name's Rob Gare and I'm a senior software engineer at Miro, and I've been working with email for almost 20 years and been with Miro for the last 3 of those years. And my role revolves around email development and includes things like partnering with our designer to build our email design system, creating solutions to localize our email content. I work on what I call the complicated transactional templates. And I also support the lifecycle marketing team with their experimentation program. And in case if you don't know what Miro is, hopefully you do, but in case you don't, Miro is a visual workspace for innovation that enables distributed teams of any size to dream, design, and build the future together. And as an engineer, I use Miro to collaborate with my team synchronously and asynchronously. I tend to use it as a project hub. I've made many process workflows in Miro, and I also sometimes make presentation graphics, which you'll probably get to see. And for our agenda today, I'll be talking about A/B testing at Miro and share some tests that we ran in 2023. And later on, I'll get a bit semi-technical, but not too in-depth around the mechanics of A/B testing. And then later on from that, we'll wrap it up with a final example and do some Q&A. Sound good? Great, let's go. So why A/B testing? Well, why email even? But I don't think I have to talk about the virtues of email with the Email Camp 2024 audience. So instead, let's start with some fun facts. Did you know that there are over 4.3 billion email users in the world, and that is out of 8.1 billion people. And if you consider the fact that a lot of those people are babies that don't even use email, that's actually a pretty impressive figure. And did you know that over 960,000 legitimate emails are sent every second, assuming that means not spam? And lastly, did you know that 94% of consumers check their email every day? So there are basically a lot of email users getting a lot of email, and they check that email a lot, or at least every day. And at Miro, email is ingrained into the product at almost all facets, right from the beginning, at sign up and activation flows, in product notifications, account management. Everybody's favorite is billing, research, and of course, marketing and sales. And in terms of volume, Miro sends over 35 million emails per month, not to each user, but to over 70 million users, although maybe it feels like it sometime. So email has a pretty broad scope and it has a long reach. So this provides a lot of opportunity for us to experiment. So why should we experiment in the first place? Well, we experiment to improve user experience and to solve problems for them. We want to make an impact and drive business growth. We want to optimize our content for a more diverse and segmented audience. And finally, we just experiment to learn about our audience. We devise hypotheses to solve challenges, and we use A/B testing or multivariate testing as a mechanism for validating these hypotheses. And experimentation overall has enabled us to run many tests that have led to functional improvements for users while also still driving business results. This is really at the core of why we A/B test. But why A/B test specifically? So clearly outlining a hypothesis and success criteria helps avoid cherry picking results after the fact. So it addresses confirmation and selection bias. Test groups will have the same environmental conditions applied throughout the duration of the test. So it will help avoid seasonality discrepancies. And finally, Achieving statistical significance helps remove doubt from the final assessment of the results. So that's why we experiment. But now let's talk about, the who of who we experiment. And I don't mean British rock bands. What I'm talking about is the Miro audience. And the Miro audience is rather diverse. There are users with all sorts of different team roles or user roles. There are all sorts of different plan types and users with different seniority levels, with different access permissions. And finally, different users have different use cases for using the product. So we send a lot of email to a lot of users, and every user's email journey is pretty unique because of all these factors. However, every user is new when they begin, and they receive a welcome email after they register. Your welcome email is the first touch point with your brand and comes at a critical time in the user's lifecycle journey, right at the very beginning. This makes it a great candidate for A/B testing, as your welcome email sets the tone for user onboarding and for your product overall. And the new audience that we're testing against is actually made up of several different segments, what we call new creators and new collaborators. So at Miro, a new creator is someone who's registered with the product, and then perhaps they created a team or even a board and invited other users to that team or the board, so collaborators. Creators tend to have a more specific use case for using Miro, while collaborators, on the other hand, are the ones who are getting invited by the creators, and they're often using Miro because of the creator's use case. And we actually had a problem with our collaborators. Many collaborators don't do anything in the product within a day after registration. So we decided to use our welcome email as a tool to help influence this behavior more positively. So that kind of explains who our audience is. But what is the actual process for A/B testing? Well, it's difficult to talk about a process that involves a team without actually, discussing the team to a certain degree. So with our project team, we work with several marketing managers who manage the project overall, and they align objectives with business expectations. We have a literal rock star designer, like literal. You can check out his band on Spotify. It's called Birdbone. We work with a copywriter who helps align our content with brand guidelines. Our analyst defines the baseline conversion that we test against and supervises the duration and the audience that we require. There's also a front-end engineer who is me, and I support the team by building custom solutions, and sometimes I also help provide ideas. And finally, we have a very jolly back-end engineer who helps build data pipelines and helps manage transactional testing. But in terms of the process itself, A/B testing is not a straight line. It's a cycle. There's no one and dones, as it were. So it often starts with a reason to test, whether that be a problem to solve or a new idea, or perhaps it was an idea from some insight from a previous experiment. And that kicks off this cycle where it's more of a rotation. So I'm going to go over a few anecdotal stories of some experiments we ran with our welcome email in 2023. And I'm going to give you the context here. So our audience is new users. Our key segment is new collaborators, and the desired impact is we want them to use the product, so product activities. All right, let's go. So our first experiment we ran was an optimized CTA placement, and the hypothesis was that if we raise the call to action higher in the email, it would increase clicks. This is a pretty good hypothesis because the higher up in the email, generally the better clicks that you get. So our execution was to rearrange existing hero elements and then push the CTA higher in the variant. And our success criteria specifically was to increase new collaborator activity in their first session in Miro, and this is key. So let's look at how it performed. It actually was a success. So against control, our new collaborators had more than 8% increase in activities. Well, conversely, for whatever reason, our new creators saw a 6% drop in activities against control. Maybe they were sad about the hero being lower. I don't really know. But anyway, we had a generally good uplift in CTR. And our insight from this was that New collaborators definitely reacted positively to the clear CTA, higher in the design, and overall changes in the hero got users to react both positively and negatively. So this led us to want to experiment more with the design of the hero, and we developed a hypothesis that by incorporating more of a full width hero, it would help drive engagement and get more users to click and get them excited about to use the product. And our execution for this was that we had a full field of color in the background of the hero that was full screen. And we actually added this animated GIF confetti thing that would like explode when the user opened the email to drive excitement. And again, our success criteria was new collaborators' activity in their first session in Miro. And it actually performed quite poorly with our new collaborators. We saw over 6% decrease in activities, while simultaneously, and this is key, we saw an increase in almost every other metric that we tested against. However, our success criteria was mapped around the new collaborators. And because we failed to get them to have more activities, this experiment was a failure. However, we still gained quite a few learnings from this. We learned that creators like more of an over-the-top design, and design can definitely lead to more click-through rate. And if you look at our hero CTA against control, we saw a 22% uplift. That's pretty insane. But what we also saw is that our audiences are actually behaving completely opposite in all of our experiments so far. So this led us to go down and adapt our path towards splitting our content for the audience. So this is what we wanted to do for the next experiment. So for experiment 3, which we call guided steps, we did 2 things. First, we took a look at the body of our welcome email, and we realized that it had a few unrelated elements, and maybe it was a bit confusing and created uncertainty. So we decided to simplify the content to more of a simple 3-step onboarding solution, more of a quick setup kind of thing. And more importantly, we split our welcome email into distinct collaborator and creator versions. So now we were able to actually tailor the content to each of these segments more specifically. However, again, new collaborators are our primary success criteria. And this experiment went pretty well. We saw an increase for both collaborators and creators and an uplift in our secondary metrics. So the insights we gained from this was that new users responded positively to the more personalized and simplified content. And by pivoting our strategy towards more personalized content, we were able to drive different messaging to each specific segment, which proved to be pretty successful. So hopefully what you've gathered from these 3 stories is that indeed we derived insights from an experiment, which then gave us new reasons to test, which gave us further new insights for new experiments, and so on and so forth. So it's an ongoing evolution, and it's a process rather than a simple straight line. So this might actually be a good time to discuss how we actually build our emails and how we manage our audience setups. So our email design system lives in a self-serve content management system that has direct integrations to our favorite email service providers. This basically enables our team to build and test at scale with little supervision or engineering support required, so we can actually scale our testing quite quickly. However, occasionally we want to try testing something that isn't easily able to do out of like the 30 plus modules we built in our design system. So sometimes I get to code stuff, which is, what I like to do. But before that happens, we have to grade the effort versus impact. So we go through this work of grading the level of effort required for the proposed solution, and then we measure that against the proposed impact. And obviously higher impact is better with lower effort, but sometimes the higher impact is worth a higher effort indeed. And when it comes to audience setup, our welcome email is part of an ongoing user journey flow that is managed with our service provider's journey tool. So we use the onboard tools to manage our audience distribution, so our 50-50 split, which we then break into smaller subdivisions for each segmented content, which also requires a higher level of effort. But what if we want to test in a transactional email? Well, transactional templates often have a very complex event configuration that makes 50-50 audience splits really challenging to achieve. And we solve this by using a feature flag and release management tool called split.io to manage our test groups. This allows us in real time to manage 50-50 audience splits, gives us consistent user allocation, so they will be in the same test assignment throughout the duration of the experiment. It allows us to create different distributions based off of audience segments on user attributes like new users, for instance. And also it's helpful for data tracking and alignment with analysts. And the way that it works is when an event is kicked off in Miro, like something happens or an activity happens in the product, it'll send the event data to our notification service in the form of an API payload. This then gets routed to Split, where a feature flag and test assignment is appended to the API payload. It gets routed back to our Noti service and then sent to our favorite email service provider for deployment. And from that point, I can take the feature flag and build conditional logic around the values of that, whether they're in the variant or control group. So this actually allows us to test inline A/B content in real time in a single transactional template. So this definitely has decreased the level of overhead it takes to test in transactional templates. And this is how we build and how we set up the audience. And eventually you have to actually launch your experiment. And your experiment is going to have to run for a certain duration. And at least at Miro, our objective is to be statistically significant with the results. So that means we need a high sample size, high enough to power the ability for us to detect the minimally detectable effect. So basically you can say, if you have a larger audience, you might have a shorter runtime. And if you have a smaller audience, you indeed have a longer runtime, which can feel really slow, like a snail. And if you don't know what statistically significance means or what stat sig means, I'm going to give you a pretty oversimplified analogy for it. So let's pretend that you ask 10 people whether they prefer red or green apples. Well, if 6 people say they prefer red apples, that's 60%, but that doesn't give me a lot of confidence that 60% of all people prefer red apples, because what if one of those 10 people is very fickle and they like different things different days, or maybe they've never had a green apple? I mean, who knows? But basically, there's a lot left up to coincidence. Now, if you ask 10,000 people if they prefer red or green apples and 6,000 say they prefer red, that boosts the confidence quite a bit that indeed 60% of people prefer red apples. And side note, I prefer red apples. That's why I'm biased in this regard, but I don't know what people prefer. So when the test runs, it runs throughout its proposed duration. And when it achieves the audience size we need for statistical significance, we close the test. At this point, the cohorts are analyzed based off of the activities that occurred during the duration of the experiment. The analyst rolls up the results and then gives recommendations for next steps and new hypotheses. And of course, we need to clean up the experiment. Please clean up your experiments, people. It's just good manners. Which then leads to, where do we go next? So there was this idea that we wanted to make the welcome email look and feel like a Miro board. And for the 4th experiment, we decided to incorporate Miro board elements into the email to familiarize users with the product and build excitement. And we executed this by adding the Miro board grid in the background of the email, and we added the cursor designs in the front end of the email, in the front part. And there's the board UI and all that. This took quite a few weeks to build. It was really fun. So this experiment is near and dear to my heart. But again, we have the same success criteria around new collaborators. So let's see how it performed. Not great, actually. So it was pretty neutral. So our variant version for new collaborators we saw 4%, over 4% decrease against control, while new creators actually liked the new treatment, over 7% increase. And the secondary metrics are even stranger to me. So we saw a drop in our CTR while seeing a boost in our hero CTA against control. And the insights we derived from this was that while the Miro elements really motivated new creators, but it added too much friction with the new collaborators because they're not familiar enough with the product yet. So why would it help them to get more excited? So plot twists, the email that looks like a Miro board failed to reach our success criteria. However, because we had already adapted our test plan and split our welcome email into distinct creator and collaborator versions, this allowed us to push the creator version to production. So now the welcome email that looks like a Miro board is our creator welcome email, and collaborator version went back to control. So we further branched our line of testing at this point. But moving forward is really a lot about looking backwards. So the first experiment taught us that users respond both positively and negatively to changes in our hero. And the results from the second experiment actually foreshadowed the results in the fourth experiment. Creators were more into the new design, whereas collaborators didn't perform as well for that one. And the outcome from the third experiment proved that by branching our experimentation line, it would allow us to be more personalized for each segment of the audience that we were trying to target. And as of the time of this recording, this is what the Miro welcome emails look like today. We've localized them into 7 different languages. Miro underwent a pretty extensive brand identity update last year, so our templates look different. And finally, our experimentation has continued and will continue to continue. So for some final thoughts, I just want to reiterate that A/B testing is a cycle. It's not a straight line. Failure is just one of 2 outcomes from an experiment. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It's just another opportunity to learn and to grow. Experimentation is a lot more fun as a team sport. Your audience is your audience. So what works well for our audience may not work well for yours. So the best way to learn more about your audience is by A/B testing. And then finally, don't quit. Keep testing, keep improving, keep going forward. And I think this is it for me. So thank you very much. I think we have some time for some Q&A right now. So let's do some Q&A.
Hey, Rob, you can hear me?
Yep.
I'm sorry to disappoint everybody. Thomas is having some technical difficulties, so we're getting the not winning variant of Thomas, which is Alfredo. We've got a few questions in the chat here. We've got a few minutes. The top voted one was, what was your approach to testing? Was your approach to testing a 50-50 split, or sending to part of the population like 2020 and then sending the winning version to the rest of the audience?
It's a good question. It really depends on the experiment, but generally we are experimenting on evergreen templates like the welcome email or transactional templates that tend to have a long lifespan. So we do test 50-50 so we can power the test faster. Bigger audience in the test gets to the conclusion faster, and then we will roll out the winning variant to the rest of the audience, which becomes the new production version.
The next one here is, since open rates are no longer a reliable metric, is there a way to test sender names, subject lines, and preview text?
Yeah, tie it to a metric that isn't specific to open rates or click rates. So, like as an example, at Miro, we tested for users to have an activity in the board. That was our primary metric. So whatever your situation is, that where you work or your company or whatever, find a meaningful metric that you're trying to improve with the email and actually make that your primary test metric.
Looks like we got T-Bird back in the ring, so I'm going to go where I belong, which is backstage.
I am back. Tag team. Thank you, boss. Appreciate that. Sorry about that, Rob. All right, as we keep going. Shannon always has the best questions, by the way. I love it, love it, love it. Okay, let me see here. All right. Did we talk about open rates as the last question, or was this the only question that we were able to do?
We just did the open rates. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to know. All right. Let me see here. I love this one. Is there a point where you can overtest? Ooh, diminishing of the returns?
I think so, actually. I think that, there's probably different experts out there who would tell you different things, but we, at least at Miro, we tend to move rapidly. So we don't test like minor, like fragment iterations per, like, we don't test every single change, like moving one element or doing like a CTA change or something like that. So like there might be several changes in one of our experiments that we're testing. I've worked at other companies where we do like test one change per experiment, which tends to make the program last incredibly long. So I think that there probably is. I think emails can also get over optimized to the point where it gets impossible to like beat the control. But again, that's why we test to find these things out.
Always be testing. Always be testing. All right, Rob. Looks like we got one last question from you. I love this one. This is from Luke Glasner, one of our on-demand session panelists. But he wanted to know: do you test at a confidence of 90% or 95%? Also, do you have a favorite sample size calculator?
So I'll do my best to answer this question. This is really Chris the analyst question, but I believe we go for 95%, and I think there is some calculation that she uses, although I would not be able to tell you that specifically, but I can get back to you on that one.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, Rob. Well, I thank you so much for taking time on your busy day to be here, and also thank you for dealing with my brief technical issues over here. But Rob, where can the great email people follow along with everything that you got going on in the email world?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, and that's kind of it. I'm kind of dormant aside from that, but feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to have a chat.
Awesome. Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you give Rob a round of applause for being here. Seriously, Rob, thank you so much. And this is your first email camp. Hope you get to come back again and join us.
All right. Thank you so much. This was really fun. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care, Rob. Good to see you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, going to get moving on to our next session with Julia Ritter and Megan Bushhausen. They're coming back on, so let me go and head on over that session. Let me make sure I don't get lost and I have the right ring that I got to get into. See you in just a moment.